Hello, Michael Vannon, and welcome to the Under Towers podcast. My name is Steven.
I'm Daniel.
I'm Sam.
And tonight, we are thrilled to have with us a very special guest, a gentleman that I've been following for several years now on YouTube, Mike from Mike's Book Reviews. Mike, thank you so much for coming on the show tonight. Really appreciate having you here.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the invite, man. I appreciate it. And for being flexible with your schedule. I appreciate that. I'm much older than you guys. And starting at 8:30, that's what time I'm in bed reading, guys. So yeah, thank you for moving that around.
We all have young children, and so sometimes counterintuitively the later hours are sometimes the only ones that we have available anymore. But like I said, Mike, I've been following your channel for several years, and fun story is that kind of in an offhanded, inadvertent way, you actually had a hand in getting our first book club and then podcast started, because I don't remember when this was, but this was a few years ago. I saw a video of yours where you were talking about, I think someone had sent you the really snazzy hardcover illustrated editions of the Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And you, the description that you gave of it was like, oh, that sounds really cool. So I immediately went and bought Shadow and Claw, and then it sat on my shelf for a couple of years because I remember I opened it and was like, nope, not ready for this yet. And and then
that's like, you passed me. I'm still too scared and intimidated to try it. So.
Well, so then fast forward a little while, and we got together again after a long absence, and we watched Akira. And we were talking about books, and Daniel had read Book of the New Sun, and Sam wanted to read it, and I was like, shoot, this bit has been sitting on my shelf for years, like we need to just read it. And so that was the impetus that started our book club and eventually the podcast. So thank you for adding to my TBR that then led to getting to hang out with my best friends some more.
That's great, man. I admire that because I came up in podcasting. But it was when my podcast host was like, "Yeah, I don't read any of this crap that you read, man, except maybe comics." So I said, "Hey, I'll start this," and somehow there's people out here who are interested in what I'm reading, so it's amazing. Yeah. So it's interesting doing it by yourself, because you can be writer, director, producer, and you ain't gotta struggle with any of that. But it's more fun, I think, sometimes to have people to talk back with you.
Yeah, for sure.
That's why I try to say yes whenever someone asks me to do this.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. We've been fortunate enough to have a few guests on the show, and we always have a blast getting a fourth person in here. One thing that we like to do with Book Club and when we have guests on is our mix master here, Daniel, likes to make drinks that are kind of in theme with what we're talking about. And since we have Mike on the show, Daniel has made a variation on Mike's hard lemonade. But knowing that you are a fellow Grimdark fan, we have Mike's Grimdark lemonade. And Daniel, would you like to describe what we're drinking this evening?
Yeah, so it's a little cocktail concoction. So it's so you got a lemonade base. So you got 2 ounces of lemon juice, sour like fate. 1 ounce of lemon syrup, which is a fleeting sweetness. And then we're going to use the Lenny's Aquavit, which is a distilled in barrels that are taken on a ship ride across the world. So and they still do it this way. They put it on ships, and it's distilled on a voyage, which I feel like all good fantasy has a voyage of some kind.
Right.
Then the next step is
it's about to take a turn.
The next step is the Marseille Amaro, which is a recipe that goes back to the medieval times, and it's based off a recipe gotten from some thieves that were going to be executed and stayed their execution by giving the recipe for this Amaro up.
And where did they? What were they arrested
that was in
for?
Marseille.
But what were they arrested for?
Thieving. Oh, stealing off dead bodies.
Yeah, stealing from plague bodies.
Yeah.
So very grimdark.
And then the last one is Ex Gratia, which is by Golden Moon. It's Genepi, so it's a style of brandy or distilled wine. But this one is from a 1850s executioner's notebook. It was a liquor that they gave to to people he was going to execute, unless they'd done really, really, really bad stuff, and then they didn't get a drink.
So
it's all that with some lemonade. And so this is a toast to you. This
Cheers
is
to you, Mike.
Mike's Grimdark.
Thanks.
Lemonade.
I'm not as
Lemonade.
fancy. I'm just having coffee, black. But cheers.
Cheers all the same.
Oh man, that's really nice. Whew. That was first drink of that. Good job. You
I
did
expect to
yourself.
see
That was
slurred
fantastic.
speech by about the 30-minute mark. Okay.
We'll see. We'll see how we do. So, like I said, I've been following your channel for quite some time. I think we have a lot of similar tastes. And something that caught my eye recently was your discussions. There were two videos in particular that really fell in line with some things that we've talked about on the podcast before, but also that we've had many discussions offline about, which is a growing dissatisfaction with the direction of modern fantasy literature, and I guess also a similar growing dissatisfaction with the leaning on magic systems in fantasy works. And those are two things that we really harp on about on and off the pod. And we primarily, as our listeners know, we read and talk about a lot of older stuff. So we wanted to have you on to talk about that and rant and rave about it. And then maybe if you're interested, we have some reading suggestions for books that fall into both of those categories of being older works that are not as tainted with some of the modern sensibilities, and that also all just happen to have soft magic systems, if you want to call it that, kind of Tolkien-esque magic systems.
Okay. It's kind of funny is I felt like I've done the full evolution. When I started the channel, I was about 2 books into Stormlight Archive, and I was like, I really love this magic system. I think this is really great. Now I'm just like, I don't need to know how the sausage is made. I'm tired of this. I don't need to go to history class to read your fantasy book. So I felt like I've done a full evolution while the channel's been going. So,
well, it feels to me, and I'm admittedly primarily reading older things, and then the newer stuff that I've delved into being in the John Gwynne and Joe Abercrombie direction, both of who have magic in everything that they write, but it is in the more mysterious and magical realm. I've enjoyed the Sanderson that I've read, and I want to preface by saying I don't want to throw shade at Brandon Sanderson. I don't think anybody here wants to throw shade at Brandon Sanderson. And I don't even blame him because it's kind of his thing. But it seems to me that, hell, he had a $42 million Kickstarter for books. And so it seems like everybody, and he was wildly popular before that as well. So it seems to me that everybody, as far as a lot of up and coming authors, and then certainly the publishing industry, think that the magic system is the reason for his success, not, the characters that he writes and the stories that he tells.
Right. No, definitely not. I think Sanderson's one of the best in the game. I just think maybe his styles just kind of passed me by to where maybe, I don't know. I don't want to say I've aged out because I don't feel like it's an age thing. It's just a personal thing. Can I cuss?
Of course you can. Yep.
What I always constantly say is I don't cuss much, but I make sure that when it happens, it's effective. And what I've been saying is I grew up, I cut my teeth on Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and I never once asked, how can Gandalf do magic? I was like, he can do magic because he's a fucking wizard. I don't need to know how he can do magic. That's enough of an explanation for me. Yeah. I never needed to know why he can do these things. So that's just kind of, I think, what I always fall back on. I think it's great if you have magic in your book. I don't need to know how it works. Sure, I understand you don't want it to be like a MacGuffin to get you out of trouble every single time. It's just always your get out of jail free card. So I get that frustration. But in the end, I don't need the magic to be a character. And I feel like that's what a lot of these things have become now. And it's just been, I really feel like I'm sitting in like biology class again, learning these magic systems or something. I'm like, that's not the style of fantasy that I like. So yes, I made that video. I was a little grumpy. And I think a lot of people took it as me saying, modern fantasy is the worst, and this is why. And I'm just saying, like, I think that it's just, I was reading a lot of these things, and I was like, it's a copycat league, I feel like. A lot of people are like, okay, Brandon Sanderson had success with this. Let me try to emulate him. And there's so many things I'll start trying now. And they'll be like, oh, it's Brandon Sanderson light. And I'm like, oh, boy, again. And it just got exhausting. I was like, I'm reading these, and I'm like, am I getting frustrated with fantasy, or am I just reading a lot of mid-series that are just, they're fine. They're not terrible. I'm not miserable while I'm reading them. but I don't think about them like an hour after I finish them, and that's not usually how it goes for me.
No. Do you think being someone, how long have you been doing the booktube thing? Because I know I've been watching your shows for like
It will actually
years.
be 6 years on Saturday.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
Nice.
That's fantastic.
Again, it was something I did on a whim. Had no idea that people talked about books on YouTube. It's wild, complete accident.
They call it
So
booktube, right?
it's been surprising. Like I said, I never really believed anyone had any interest in what I was reading, but I'm glad it is because it's been an adventure for sure.
Yeah. Well, so being someone that has been involved in the world of booktube and then the greater worlds of, Book Talk and Bookstagram and all those various tendrils that go off of it, I'm curious. Obviously, we mentioned, the publishing industry and authors kind of glomming onto the Sanderson idea with magic systems in particular. But do you think that, and I don't know that I have an opinion either way. I think that Book Talk and everything is great. It's getting people talking about books, but I do wonder, because outside of your channel, I see but most of the other channels. Philip Chase is another outlier in this category, I think. But I see a lot of people talking about the exact same books, and so I wonder if do you feel like that has anything to do with the proliferation of the same story or these new modern ideas, or is it like I'm kind of wondering if it's chicken or egg thing here, if it's having an influence on the writers and the publishers, or is it just
I feel like
people talking about the same
writers
things?
and the publishers still look at people like me as just what I always say, just a guy with Wi-Fi. They're pretty much look at us like it's it seems like a lot of authors are starting to come around and realize, hey, this is like the best advertising that we can get. I think it was, gosh, like in 2020, I talked to Jim Butcher and I was like, thank you. So at the time, is the biggest author I'd ever had on the channel.
Right.
And I was just like, thank you so much. He's like, hey, I was trying to explain to my publicist that way more people are going to watch this than read my answers in some magazine somewhere. So he was one of those I felt like was onto it a little early. But I think I'm 46 years old. It's easy for my generation to be like, Book Talk, it's trash, whatever. Look, bookstores are surviving because of Book Talk now. So it's not my bag. Like I go to Book Talk and I immediately turn into my parents. Everything's too loud. Just turn it down, turn it off, And so I realized that wasn't me. That's not my type. I'm clearly I can't say anything quickly. I think the shortest videos I have on my channel are like 22 minutes. I can't say anything quickly. So short form content's not really my bag. But I definitely don't have any problems with it. But it's helping a lot of people get discovered. But as far as like the herd mentality, I feel like of booktube, that's a real thing. And I mean I can understand because like I finally have tried Dungeon Crawler Carl because everybody wouldn't shut up about it. And I liked it quite a bit. And I'm like, do I even need to do a video about it? Because everybody else has done one. I was like, yes, do one. So I think it's you want to do what your viewers want.
Sure.
And a lot of them are going to want you to do the new thing. What's the new hotness? They're going to want you to do that. But with me, it was a lot of it. I said recently, I stopped having a lot of guests on the channel because I feel like all the same booktubers are all talking to each other, and it just seems like it's becoming like the just the same old conversations. How many times you can have the same conversation with people that have similar channels? And I don't know where I kind of fall on it because I mean I want to be able to talk about stuff that people want me to talk about. But I'm also realized when I made that video that we talked about, a lot of people are like, oh my God, thank you so much for saying what I've been thinking. And today I just put out a video talk about basically, I've already had this year kind of planned out. But in 2026, I'm like, here's a lot more of these classic fantasy series I'm getting into, Rift War, Tad Williams, things like that. Some classic series I've always wanted to do, Elric. And I'm hoping that, it won't alienate my audience. But, I try to keep it mixed up. But I listen to the audience. And that's why I put out, it's like, I'm not starting 22 new series next year. I want you guys to help me whittle these down. Which ones would you guys like to read with me? Which ones would you guys like me to talk about? So that's what I try to do. But I know that there are a lot of people, I've mentioned before, the Dungeon Crawler Carl, what was it? Jade City. That one was real big for a while. Rage of Dragons, when I first started, it's like everybody was doing like the same things. The same books, and I try not to do that, but I'm also like, look, just because someone else has done it, don't mean I'm going to do it. For the first 3 years I had this channel, every time I did a review for anything, well, Daniel Green's already done that. So was anyone allowed to talk about it besides Daniel Green?
Right.
You know, it's like I think that, Daniel, he's a pioneer of this. He's got all the bragging rights in the world. Don't misunderstand me, but I'm saying that we're very different. We have very different opinions. We're going to talk about very different things. So I think it's okay, if two booktubers with a bigger audience talk about the same book. But yeah, I see what you're talking about. Like everyone's doing this right now, or everyone's talking about that book right now. So I'll either try to wait for it to calm down, or just I'll talk about it in my weekly video. I'm not going to do like a dedicated video to it or anything like that. But sometimes you just want to listen to your audience. And they're telling you, hey, we want you to talk about Dungeon Crawler Carl. Dang it, I guess I'm going to read it and talk about it.
Right. I did see that video that you posted this morning, and I know we read all the Elric books in our book club before we started the podcast, and we definitely have some thoughts.
Good or bad?
Both.
Oh, okay.
It's a mixed bag.
Both. We definitely.
Well, I got a lot of comments about it aging poorly, and I'm like, does that mean aging poorly as in like the content or the writing style? And they're like, yes. Okay.
I don't think we have. I mean,
That is a
honestly,
very bizarre observation about Elric, I find.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, because the issue with he's got the 3 novels now. Which are a great way to read them because they're beautiful editions.
Is that the collections? The ones
the
like
collections,
the hardcover collections? Yeah.
But I recommend reading it in publication order because they were short stories to begin with. I just recommend going back and reading them in the order he wrote them, which you can figure out and kind of jump around.
Yeah, I did the same with Robert E. Howard and Conan.
Yes.
Yeah, it's very similar because we read Conan almost right before we read Elric, and we read the Del Rey Conans that are in publication order, not in any sort of chronological order. And it's kind of unfortunate because Michael Moorcock had a hand in these new editions and ordering them chronologically. But I think that similarly to how Howard was writing it all out of order, and so you're learning new things about Conan by jumping back and forth in time, and it feels right. We all 3 of us kind of agreed that I think we lost something of the magic of Elric, and maybe something that I've heard Brandon Sanderson talk about Elric, I've heard Joe Abercrombie talk about Elric lovingly, and I think we maybe missed something reading it out of written order.
Yeah,
and then I would highly recommend just don't read.
I've said something similar. A lot of people I tell them you can read any Conan story and it's fine and self-contained on its own. But if you do read in that publication order, you do get things that you wouldn't if you just picked up that Chronicles of Conan that's all out. So.
You can see the way he's thinking about the character and the way the character's developing, even though it's not literally Conan developing in time. It's the character's developing in the author's head. It's just a different way to think about it. But yeah, just to piggyback on Stephen, you can read it if you want, but the 3rd book, The White Wolf, which are novels all written post 2000, they're really not. There's a stark drop in quality.
They were wildly
That's
disappointing.
just what I would say.
Wildly disappointing.
The older books, to me, you talk about things not aging well. The older books I thought actually were all quite good.
I agree, 100%.
I was told, and I don't know how legitimate this is, but I was told that what y'all were talking about, The White Wolf, was like his response to thinking that Andrzej Sapkowski stole his character with Geralt of Rivia and Witcher.
Oh, really?
I mean,
that's what I was told. I see why he named it White Wolf. Yeah,
that's interesting.
So, maybe
I did wonder about the same name being used, but
I mean, but it's that era of fantasy where kind of everybody is borrowing from everybody. It's the same thing as like nobody's bitching about the fact that
I tried to tell people. You know how many times Conan's been imitated?
Well, and that's
basically every R.A. Salvatore book you can find. There's a Conan character in there.
And I mean, even Elric himself was written as like an inverse kind of mirror image of Conan.
It's literally opposite.
Yeah, where he's
all the way down to the red eyes.
Yeah, instead of being this hulking, strong barbarian, he's this weak, frail.
So you're saying do volume 1 and 2 of Elric and then stop.
That's what I would say.
Would recommend
I wish we had
much.
done that. I wish we had
do too.
That.
I think that it soured our feeling of Elric, as well as, I mean, of course, like you mentioned in your video too, the article that he wrote about utterly disparaging Tolkien, that left a wildly bad taste in our mouth as well.
Yeah, not to be
like I mean, there's a lot of authors out there that say stupid stuff. you know,
Yeah,
and I
for
try
sure.
not to let that. That's why I don't follow any authors on Twitter except a couple that I would consider friends at this point. Because I'm just like, I don't want them saying stupid stuff, and I just don't want to read their books. I'll turn me off for reading their books. So I'm just like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
no, I don't want to do that. So
I feel like
yeah,
that
that's
says a
why I
lot
put
about
off
their
more copies long.
publishers and their editors. You know, that they don't have a publisher or editor on their Twitter account, which maybe they need
Right.
one, like to
Yeah.
help.
Right? Yeah,
you
yeah,
know.
yeah.
Some
They
of
have
them
Control the
you need to
narrative
have
a
your
little.
publicist running your Twitter account.
Yeah,
Like you
that's
tell them
right.
what you want to say, and they like filter it
Yeah, they
Yeah.
gotta.
for you.
They gotta
I think.
chop
But
it
you think
down.
about that essay just pisses me off so much because I'm like, look, Tolkien did not like Dune by Frank Herbert, but he was a complete gentleman about it. He wasn't
Yes.
a
Yeah.
shit. I just have no idea why he felt like he needed to be that big a turd about it.
Yeah.
When also, like, this is not the most important thing in the world, but like Michael Moorcock, brilliant idea man, but he did not have the writing chops to be, you know, throwing shade at Tolkien about anything writing wise.
And he's a good writer, but no, it feels a tear down.
Yeah, 100%. Do you have a favorite Conan story? Because I know you're a massive Robert.
Yeah,
E.
Tower
Howard
of the
fan.
Elephant's always usually my
Yeah.
go-to.
Yes.
I mean, it's just so damn perfect.
That's ours too.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Gosh, I mean, I hate to be like Office Space and say I kind of like all of them. I'm trying to think of the one where he's fighting like the chimpanzees. God dang
The
it.
gray apes. Yeah,
The gray apes.
Sam is a big fan of
It's
gray
yeah, it's something to stick in your brain, but sometimes I mean, they're so short, it's hard to kind of separate some of them sometimes.
Sure.
But I mean, when I didn't actually start reading those until like 2020, and I blew through those in like 2 days. I think these are incredible. They're so short, but yet they still have so much meat on the bone. What an
Yeah.
incredible writer that guy was. It's sad to think about what more we could have got out of Robert E. Howard.
It really is sad.
Insane. Amazing writer.
You touch on something though that I think is maybe not at the heart of the whole modern and past divide, where like short stories used to be the format where authors were found and sort of, you know, forged in the fires of those sci-fi and fantasy magazines. But I feel like there are things where the old authors used to be able to say something in 20 or 100 or 150 pages, but then like you can't get a book out nowadays that's under 500, and then even 500 is like kind of short. It's like
Think about when At the Mountains of Madness came out, they were like, "This is too long." By Lovecraft, it was like 88 pages. You know, so that's the thing for me. Is like I think as fantasy fans that we've gotten used to our books being door stoppers.
yeah,
You know, but I felt like they used to need to be. Now it's just like I feel like all you're trying to do is make each book longer than your last one.
yeah,
You know, because like the new Stormlight book did not need to be 1,400 pages, Brandon. You could have told that story in about 600 easily.
Yeah. That's
easily. And I'm just like, why are we doing this? Is it just because the last one was that long, or the one before that was that long? That's just what it feels like. And I don't know if that's true. That's just how I feel, because I read them and I'm just like, that's a lot of time of just dawdling around doing nothing,
Yeah.
just to kind of fluff out the page count. And it's driving me crazy.
It feels like a market expectation at this point that the book being
Well, my
huge
shelf doesn't
is
have any
part
more
of it.
space. Write shorter books.
I agree, dude. I am so with you. I'm just saying, I'm in the restaurant business, so like I've managed a restaurant. I've got kids now. It's like I don't have time to read these books. Like I would like to read some of them,
Yeah.
but
While we're on this angle, what do you think is missing in modern fantasy that we had more of back in the day?
Escapism, man. I mean, everybody will tell you, like, I got comments in that video that, like, literally every story ever has social commentary in it, but not to a point where I feel like it's. First, I think that's a bullshit. I disagree. I think there are a lot of authors who just seriously wanted to create something. They weren't like grinding an axe about something. But even if that is the case, I never felt like it's something that just like takes you out of the story like it does now. Just like, I think it was Will Wheaton who I think can be a moron sometimes. I'm just gonna be honest with you. I mean, maybe it's the old Wesley Crusher hate. I don't know, maybe. But he says something sometimes. He said science fiction books aren't about what's going to happen in the future. It's about what's going on right now. And I was like, oh my Yeah, that is the dumbest thing I've ever heard in my life. And there's people who agree with that, and there's people who don't. And I think if you go into a book feeling that way, that literally everything is social commentary, you're going to see what it is you want to see.
Sure.
You're going to be jumping at ghosts. You're going to look at that roll of toilet paper and think that that's some kind of way of somebody grinding an axe.
Right.
And I just don't like to read that way. I like escapism. I like to go to other worlds because, hey, sometimes the real world isn't a lot of fun. And for some people that like to bury their head in the sand on all those world going ons, that's what I always had the fantasy genre for. And I feel like ever since, I don't know, 15 years now, it's just more and more. It's just about whatever you're upset about in real life, you're finding a way to write it into your fantasy book. And I'm like, it's not like you're writing the new thriller novel that takes place today. You're writing some fantasy book that takes worlds away with elves and dwarves and stuff, and you're talking about what's going on in politics today. And I just don't get it. I just don't get it. I mean, there must be an audience for it. There must be.
Well, maybe that's why magic systems have taken such a turn for very linear and cognitive and sort of logical, like, reasoning. Like, if a couple of things were true, then this whole magic system, you could go to school for this and, like, learn it, and it could be your profession. It's almost like the fantasy world has been taken over by, like, a dark sort of fantasy.
And I thought civilization had peaked when they actually gave courses on speaking Klingon in college.
Right. I think I have Duolingo on my phone. I think you can still do on Duolingo.
We just need a nation to speak it now, like a human nation.
Well, my kid, he discovered that old Eddie Murphy movie called Daddy Daycare.
Yeah.
Steve Zahn's character in that movie, like, is fluent in Klingon.
Yeah.
And so he's like, is this really a real language? And I was explaining to him, they give courses on how to take this. Like, there's people who have their wedding vows in Klingon and stuff. He's like,
that's crazy.
Dorks, man. And I was like, you're a Pokemon guy. What are you talking about, dorks?
Yeah, you like some little, like, monster anime, bro. Like,
I was like, weren't you just telling me every single bit of lore in Elden Ring? Shut up, dude.
I went to film school, and escapism was a bad word there as well. As far as I remember getting into debates about the value of just fun, action movies or whatever that didn't have some sort of grand message or some, massive artistic thing about them. That was just like, this is just about having fun and escaping from real life for an hour and a half in the movie theater. And I've never understood the pushback against that idea that that's something that some people need in their lives. And also just like, it's good to just have fun. Like, life can be hard and serious enough. And, political climates being what they are, it's like you're inundated with it 24/7. Now it's good to have an outlet where you can just escape and not have to worry about it.
Yeah, tropes and escapism seem to be the words that upset a lot of people. Because, like, I mean, in that video, I got called a libtard and I got called a magatard, but it's in the same video. And I'm like, this is incredible because I said I'm upset with modern fantasy. Wow. Okay.
I think that means you're probably on the right track.
They can't.
I just hit them with a good old thanks for watching, because clearly you're not going to be able to reason with people like that. But it's just, that's amazing. It's wild. It's wild. Just to say, I just want my entertainment to be entertainment. I can't see why that's a controversial statement. I really can't.
Well, and
I say, if you're into those things, man, that's great. Those books, they're selling a lot, so someone must like them.
Yeah, it's interesting with escapism too, because it's actually a perfect vessel for, like, human truths or sometimes mythic truths, which I feel like actually end up getting to something deeper than just, like, current social and political commentary, which is really not that valuable. And typically people also read that stuff just to affirm whatever they already think. There's not a lot of, like, I took in this story and now I vote differently or something because I read a fantasy book.
Some people tell me that sometimes. You only read authors that you agree with. I was like, I just read a Stephen King and a Larry Correa book back to back. Are you kidding me? Those two couldn't be more different.
Yeah.
So funny. No.
Well, it's something I'm sure I've brought this up a million times, but shout out to my screenwriting teacher, Steve Womack. Very first day of intro to screenwriting, one of the very first things he told us was, you never start with theme. You always start with character, you start with story, and you write your first draft, and then when you're done with your first draft, you can figure out what your theme is based on what you've already written, and then you can go back and do things and tweaks in your forthcoming.
I know that's a
draft
personal thing, but for me, what I tell people is you can have the most amazing prose, you can have the most incredible world building. If I don't like your characters, I don't really care. So,
Yeah,
but if I
100%.
like your characters, I'll probably grow to love your world, and I probably won't even notice your prose if it's really good characters.
Sure.
So that's, I mean, that's why I have the hot take of I don't see why people love Name of the Wind so much. I'm like, yeah, he's a beautiful writer. He's got away with words. He's got a very, very nice world. I just don't care about these characters at all.
Yeah.
You know?
But I think that I feel like a lot of the issues, not even just with modern fantasy literature, but I think that this is a modern storytelling problem in general, is writers, whether it's novels or movies or shows or whatever, starting with theme instead of your base, like you're saying, of a good, strong character. And then, I mean, certainly there are exceptions to the rules. Can't necessarily think of one off the top of my head, but most of the time, most writers, if they start with a theme, it's going to end up feeling preachy, which maybe is going to appeal to a certain crowd that agrees with that preaching, but for most people is going to be a massive turnoff, I think.
Yeah, I was hosting a panel with 6 authors sometime earlier this year, and every one of them were talking about my book is actually like a stand-in for COVID, or my story's a stand-in for capitalism, or something. It's like, how's your characters though?
Right. Well, look, let's take it back to Tolkien. Like he swore up and down that his books had nothing to do with World War I. And as a reader, we can look back and say like, well, goodness, JR, you're like, obviously this had some impact on what you were writing. But he wasn't setting out to try to make an allegory about his experience in World War I.
Right. He said it was not allegory, and people spent the last 70 years explaining, actually, the man that spent his entire life on this one world and story didn't know what he was talking about. But but I find that difference interesting of his intent. It was not his intention. Things pop up, things happen, messages happen in stories. But he was setting out to tell this quest story with these incredible characters, and not, World War I creeps in, because how could it not? But it's not he wasn't setting out to make an allegory of the political climate in the turn of the 20th century,
or World War II, which is when he wrote it and his son fought in. And a lot of people have said the ring is it's the nuclear bomb or something like that, which again it's very clearly not. But at the same time, because what he wrote again has like nuggets of real truth, you can think about the nuclear bomb with the ring.
Sure.
And it's perfectly fine. It's not right to say that that's what Tolkien was thinking about, but it's when you write something with depth and truth to it. Again, your works last and actually can speak to all sorts of things, and I think that's what's lost on a lot of things. Where you say, if you write a book about COVID, it might mean something to someone that went through that. It might mean someone who's interested in the period if it happens later. But it's going to be, unless you're able to have that influence your writing and you kind of divorce yourself from it, your work's probably not going to have staying power because it has one context it makes sense in. It's not going to. You can write a work. Well, interestingly, where people love to talk about
Between Two Fires
with COVID,
which
obviously was written beforehand. So you can speak to things that people go through without
that's what I was talking about seeing it. If you want to see it, you're going to be able to see it.
Yep.
Have you read Between Two Fires?
I did.
Yeah, I read that for the first time during COVID, which was interesting. It was an interesting dose.
What's so funny is I started doing that Into the Multiverse, where I was doing Stephen King stuff in publication order, and The Stand came up during COVID. I was like, I did not plan this. I swear to God.
That's incredible. That is incredible. Yeah, wow. I had no idea what Between Two Fires was going to be about. It just, the cover was sick, and it was on several lists of like best horror books, and then I start reading it in the middle of a plague, reading about a plague. But then also reading about come on in. It's essentially done. We only lost 10% of our people yesterday. And so it's like, Okay, well, here's a nice dose of perspective for what we're going through. Let's see. Let me look at my notes. Looking at this conversation of modern literature and the glory days of sci-fi fantasy in the past, we continually go back to the year 1984 and the years around it. There does seem to be like there was something very magical in the air then. You have Book of the New Sun, you have Lioness by Jack Vance, you have the Drenai Saga by David Gemmell is starting, you have the Black Company is starting. Like there's these major shifts in genre, but also just all of these seminal works coming out at kind of the same time. I do wonder though, being 40 years on and looking back at this time, is there an extent where we're looking at the past through rose-colored glasses?
Maybe. I mean, I'm Gen X. I think you guys are probably right after, right? I think we're the kings of nostalgia. We're the kings of member berries. Where I was always better in my day, and I even acknowledged that in that video, saying it might be something I'm doing, but I think I can also just say, these things kind of they don't go one way and never go back. It seems like it's a pendulum swing every time.
Sure.
You guys don't remember in the 80s, fantasy's dead, and then Shannara comes out, and all of a sudden, boom, fantasy's huge again. Regardless of how you feel about Shannara, Terry Brooks brought it back to the mainstream, where people that weren't reading fantasy books were picking them up. Was it like Lord of the Rings? Yeah, that's what people liked about it,
Sure.
But I feel like these things always come back. So it's like right now, is fantasy dying because of romantasy? Because you go into a bookstore right now and it's wall-to-wall romantasy. Does that mean that we'll never, ever have Dragon Rider fantasy again? No, I don't think that's what's going to happen. The genre goes through waves like this. Remember, guys, it wasn't that long ago when we were talking about paranormal teen romance was going to kill fantasy because Twilight blew up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like this happens about every 15, 20 years. It's not unusual. It's just it's persevered for way too long for me to think it's just going to go away.
For sure.
But for me, what I try to explain to people is I want to go back and read some of those classics I never have. I try to stay modern with the things, but if I'm not having a good time, this is a good excuse to go back and check out those ones I haven't. But also, those kind of books are still out there. They're just being published, independently, self-published now. And I know, as for myself, I could speak to my ignorance on that. I was very, very ignorant about self-publishing just 2 or 3 years ago. I thought if you can't get traditionally published, you're just not that good of an author.
Right.
I had no ideas because you didn't want to be told what to write. And I started reading some independent. I'm like, wow, these are really good. Oh no, I saw a typo. I've seen typo in a lot of AAA books. Okay,
For
it
sure.
happens sometimes.
Yeah, for
I don't
sure.
think that's a reason to say I'm not going to read self-pub. But I'm also not one of those people who's like, if you're not reading self-published authors, you're a bad person. I'm definitely not that guy.
Right.
I'm saying, if you want, escapism and you want dragon fantasy, you want tradition, you want tropes, those things I love, you can still find them. You just got to look for them. You're probably not going to find them at Barnes and Noble right now, but I think we will again. It'll come back. It always does.
And I do find myself wondering if 40 years from now, if people will look back at the 2010s and 2020s and the John Gwynns and the Joe Abercrombies and the Fonda Lees and look, I wonder if people will look at it the same way. And it's hard to say now because we look back at these 1984 and we don't see all of the chaff that came out that same year because it's been filtered out. So I kind of wonder if, because there are truly amazing works coming out now. And I wonder if the same conversation will happen 30, 40 years from now.
I think it depends when you grow. If you grow up with it, obviously you're going to look at it a little differently. My generation hated the Star Wars prequels. And the generation after us loved the Star Wars prequels because they grew up with them,
Yeah.
So I really think that does matter. I think in 40 years, you might see people who champion those series or something like that. But I also think that when something really good's happening, like you wish, when you're older, you say, I wish I could go back and tell myself you're living in the good times right now.
Sure, right, yeah.
So, because when those good times are happening, you're way too self-aware of what's going on. You can't actually just let yourself enjoy something. I think sometimes, especially now. in this era of instant gratification, making sure we know how everybody knows how we feel about something, immediately on social media. I think you can get a little jaded and overly critical on some things, and that's why I said a lot of things with like when The Force Awakens comes out. Look, I know how it's aged, but when The Force Awakens comes out, I was just like, is it just probably a remake of Star Wars 4? Maybe. But, hey, I let myself enjoy it. I had a good time with it,
I enjoyed Force Awakens very much.
I did too.
Then The Last Jedi came out, and I was like, wow, Force Awakens sucked,
Somehow.
Anyway,
somehow
I'm just saying that,
sucked.
I think that we've gotten to a point where we just can't let ourselves enjoy something. Like, it just seems like
100%.
I'll go on Twitter, like, during a House of Dragon episode, and people are just, like, pissed off and moaning about it. And they're like, well, actually, I think it might have been good. I don't know. And I'm like, did you like it while you watched it?
Yeah.
Then shut up.
Yeah.
Was it fun?
Quit convincing yourself not to like something.
Yeah.
There's a definite epidemic of that, and I think that goes full circle back to the conversation of escapism being a bad word, and like feeling guilty and not like you can enjoy something just because you can't like give some sort of master's presentation about the symbolism in it or something. It's like sometimes it's okay to just enjoy a thing. It doesn't have to be deeper than that.
Yeah, like I'm reading, going to be starting going back to reading some Legend of Drizzt books, and people are like, "Oh, they're just like way too simple for me." I'm like, "Symbols good, man. Not everything has to be. Oh my God, my brain hurts fantasy. It's okay sometimes to just enjoy dragons and dwarfs and elves and shit, man. It's fun."
Maybe this is a good time to transition to some suggestions for you, because the Drenai Saga by David Gemmell, Legend and et al. Were on our list of things to bring up, and they're well written for sure. They're very fun, but David Gemmell talked extensively about how Louis L'Amour was one of his biggest influences. I know you're a Western guy with Lonesome Dove.
That's it though. Just okay. Lonesome Dove is really all I've enjoyed. Yeah,
you might.
I haven't read a lot of Western. I love Western movies.
Sure,
but I've never really gotten into I didn't like. It's another one of probably my most nuclear take is I didn't like Blood Meridian. And everyone seems to love that book.
We're reading that later this year, so
that is.
I hope y'all like it. It seems like most people do. To me, it was just like this is too much.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a lot. But Louis L'Amour wrote, very small, very fast paced, very action packed little paperbacks. Westerns. He wrote something in the realm of like almost 200 of these.
Yeah, Brian Lee Durfee goes on and on about him.
Yeah, and he's great. And David Gemmell very purposefully was kind of essentially wanting to do like a fantasy Louis L'Amour. And Louis L'Amour is very much in the like darkening of Westerns, when it's still like good guy white hat, bad guy black hat, very black and white perceptions of good and evil, and the good triumphs and the bad guy gets got, and the old school golden age kind of Western stories. And so Gemmell ends up almost kind of inventing heroic fantasy in that kind of realm. And it's though I've read four and a half, I think, Drenai Saga books, and they're all just, like, some are better than others. Legend is at the top of the heap thus far of what I've read, but they're so fun, and they're extremely fast paced, like a sitting or two and you've read the whole book. And I think that those are a perfect example of good escapist fantasy literature.
You guys ready to flip a table?
Do it.
I already read Legend. I thought it was
come on, Mike.
The thing about Legend was, like, when Druss was on the page, I loved it. I thought he was amazing.
100%. Yeah. He is the draw to the whole story. Right?
I forget who the main character of that book was, but he's like smacking women around and stuff, and he's like completely unlikable. And I was like,
yeah, I don't super disagree with that take in that.
But the Druss stuff was amazing. I was like, can we just get all them? And people are like, yeah, there's lots of prequel books. I'm like, well, I would go to those, I think, because I thought that character was terrific.
Sadly, he's not in the other ones.
No, there are more. There's more prequel ones.
We read like a bunch of them, but Druss doesn't show up. But I totally agree with Druss being the draw card for it, because I love to see an old guy like literally just shake off his boots and he's like, I can still kick ass, and then does kick ass. Like, basically Even after he dies, he kicks ass in that book.
Say, I don't know if you guys read the First Law sequels. It made me think of Red Country.
I haven't.
There's a particular character
through those. Yeah.
That has that kind of same arc in Red Country.
Fantastic. Yeah, I've read the First Law several times, the original trilogy. We're reading through the trilogy now in anticipation of, obviously it's not the same, but in just immersing ourselves in Joe Abercrombie's world before The Devils comes out next month.
It's good, guys. Read it already. It's very good. You're gonna like it.
Okay, cool.
I'm so stoked. I adore Joe Abercrombie.
I tell people, don't go into it expecting First Law, but you can expect that same kind of banter that you liked in First Law.
Well, nobody currently writes characters like Abercrombie, and you can tell that and I've heard him talk about how he loves Lonesome Dove, because reading through, I'm halfway through Lonesome Dove now, and that Larry McMurtry's character writing is right up there. It's probably like it's the pinnacle, right? And Joe Abercrombie is the only person I've read that like approaches Larry McMurtry's character writing, where you can literally just read a sentence.
You can open a book and you can read like one line and you know what character it is. That's what.
Well, you can even read just like you can even just read the prose in the chapter that is from the character's perspective and know which character it is.
Yeah,
like
they're talking about shitting themselves. It must be Glockta again.
Yeah. It's just absolutely brilliant. So. Kind of going in chronological order, not necessarily in some cases of what we've read. Have you ever heard of the Broken Sword by Paul Anderson?
I have not.
So, Broken Sword we read right after we read Conan, because we were kind of going through a sword and sorcery kind of collegiate series almost that we made for ourselves. Daniel, you brought Broken Sword to us. Do you want to kind of give a little elevator pitch for Broken Sword?
So one thing that's cool about it is it was released in 1954, so it came out the same year as Fellowship of the Ring. So it's a really cool sort of alternate look at the state of fantasy. And what's really interesting is how the books are very similar in a lot of ways. They have very similar elves and dwarves. It's a very different story because it ends up being a changeling story, but it's set in England with Vikings in the mid 1200-ish, I think.
Yeah,
maybe
or
a little
earlier.
And so then you've got the Norse gods in the world is real with elves and trolls, and then it's humanity.
I was going to say, it sounds like historical fiction, and then you hit me with God.
It is.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
It's kind of in the vein of like if you wanted to look at the God of War games as historical, because they take place on Earth. Yeah. Sure, yeah. But literally these are, on Earth, but with the mythology, all the mythologies of the world
being true.
Existing.
So there's even references to the Greek myths and the Greek gods, and then there's also the whole fairy world is being encroached upon by Christianity. And they're like, we're powerless against it. So there's a whole like that element too, which is very fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic. It's a standalone book.
Yeah, I think 270
something around there. Yeah, but I remember my first reaction just in the first couple of chapters was like, holy shit, this is so cool. Like, just how is this not on everybody's reading list?
Yeah,
it also has the alarming layer of incest in there that you get from
because it's from Norse mythology.
From
the sagas.
But also, like, I feel like that's only kind of like reared its head really with the Game of Thrones recently. Nobody knows that, like, oh yeah, incest is a normal thing in fantasy novels, but because of Game of Thrones now, I feel like it's one of those. It's almost become a trope now.
Yeah,
sure. It's like a new trope.
It's funny is I actually got my wife to read Song of Ice and Fire before like it was even like acquired by HBO. It's how long ago it was. Right. I was like, it's like really amazing. I think you'll like it quite a bit. And she basically gets to like about like chapter 3, and she just looks at me like, "The fuck do you got me reading?" Which was Jamie and Cersei, and she's you got me reading. I was like, yeah, there's a little incest every 100 pages or so, but don't worry about it. You'll get used to it.
Don't worry about it. It's fine.
It all shakes out in the end.
I love it.
It's Shakespearean.
It's on an every 100-page timer, though. So.
Yeah. Get ready. Yeah.
So Broken Sword is definitely.
I just added it on Goodreads.
That's a recommendation from Under Towers. In series, one of the next things we read was Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser by Fritz Leiber. Now, Fafhrd is, when you get into the kind of sword and sorcery discussions, Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are kind of second only to Conan in a lot of circles.
Really?
It's also kind of it's one of the biggest influences on Dungeons and Dragons, as far as like, you know, goofy duo going on quests.
It's basically Conan but funny.
It's very funny, and it has the characters
and Conan does get funny sometimes because he's so like, you know, just hulking and.
But
stuff.
these ones are laugh out loud funny.
Yes.
And Fafhrd is a giant barbarian, and his best friend is the Grey Mouser, who is a short rogue character. So you essentially have a barbarian and a rogue in a D&D sense, going on quests, and they're short stories. There's one or two novels.
One novel,
but they're on the short side too.
It's a 150-page novel. Yeah.
Like a novella, right?
But I know you like laughing occasionally in books as well. This one was one that had us actually literally laughing out loud while we were reading them.
The one to read is Swords of Lankmar. That's the best, I think, out of everything we read from
I've heard of Fritz Leiber, but I've never heard this Grey Mouser thing. So
yeah, he wrote a lot of different things, but Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser is kind of one of those unfortunately forgotten about series that influenced a lot of works. I think that's another one that Abercrombie has listed as a series that was a big influence on him. With his humor and the witty banter between characters.
You know, it's funny. His first log gets labeled as like this cruel, grim, dark, disgusting book, and I was like, man, I laugh a lot.
It's
reading
hilarious.
This book.
It's hilarious. It's so funny. I think that's an important part of grimdark is the humor. You got to have something to balance the other stuff out, or it's just extremely oppressive.
It turns into nihilism, I think, and that's slippery slope.
Absolutely. So, Fafhrd the Grey Mouser, another Under Towers approved recommendation. Then just kind of Jack Vance in general, but right now we are reading the Lioness trilogy, and I called it a couple episodes ago, Grimdark George MacDonald, as in, you know, Princess and the Goblin, the old school fantasy that Tolkien and C.S. Lewis were reading, but similar in some ways to Broken Sword. You know, Lioness is in the modern. Or not modern, but the real world, modern in like Conan terms.
Just pre-King Arthur times.
Yeah, it's pre-King Arthur, in the kind of area of the British Isles, and all of the kind of classic fairy tale creatures of the fae folk, trolls, ogres, all those sorts of things exist. Magic exists. And it's phenomenal. It's another, again, it has a great sense of humor, but it's such an adventure. Phenomenal characters, some of the best names. I love names. As a writer, names are one of the things that kick my butt the hardest, and Linus has some of the best names across the board for characters that I've ever read.
I will say too, for Lioness, when you're talking about magic systems and how Gandalf, like, I don't even know how wizards fucking work. Like, that Lioness actually captures that entire vibe, but then kind of brings like, there's like unspoken rules that only the wizards know, and like you can't ever know what they are.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. And then there's like just like random shit that happens with them that it's like, oh, that's some wizard stuff. But it's not like it never feels like a get out of jail free. It's always like, what is happening with them that this is possible? And he'll just like write it in as throwaway lines, like, oh yeah, this mirror can like grant you 3 wishes. Anyways, we're gonna talk about something totally different now. Like just like throwaway lines. And isn't this one of Martin's biggest influence for Game of Thrones?
He's talked about his love of Jack Vance, yeah.
Yeah, and I think Linus, and then
the name comes
Princes.
up a ton whenever I talk about wanting some classic stuff. Jack Vance comes up a lot. But what's the first book called? Because I'm not seeing anything about Lioness.
It's called Soldrin's Garden.
Oh, I'm thinking like Lioness, like
right,
Lioness.
It just occurred to me that
Leoness. We're also probably saying it wrong, and there's like a lot of different.
Probably.
There's like Spanish translations of it. It took me forever to find the damn thing, but it was great.
Yeah,
I say things wrong every single video, and people think I do it on purpose for like engagement, and I'm just like, I don't audiobook, so I don't know how to say some of these names. Sorry.
Right. So yeah, Linus is spectacular. We're reading the third book of that this month, and it's so good. This next one that we had on the list is a classic, so you may very well have read this already, but we read last year in our kind of reading through some
Lord of
classic
the
Arthur.
Rings, the Fellowship
Lord
of the
Rings.
No.
We did a series on classic Arthurian literature last year, and a favorite of all of ours was Once and Future King by T.H. White.
Haven't.
Okay.
I wanted. The thing is, like, I've been for Le Morte d'Arthur forever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As
read
Mallory
that,
is like my go-to for all things.
So you have
Arthur.
So okay, I'm glad that you said that you've read Le Morte d'Arthur, because we read that first. We read the Mabinogion, and then we read Le Morte d'Arthur, and I appreciated Once and Future King, and then ended up appreciating Le Morte d'Arthur more after reading Once and Future King, because we had read it in that order, and kind of knowing that the classic order of Arthurian stories set forth by Le Morte d'Arthur. T.H. White was kind of expanding on the stories. We also read Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court, which is
I mean, I read that in junior high, yeah.
Sure. But that's like, Mark Twain literally dropping his character into Le Morte d'Arthur.
Yeah.
Once and Future King is T.H. White essentially kind of retelling some of the stories from Le Morte d'Arthur. And it is so beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things I've ever read. It's one of the funniest things I've ever read. Like, talk about laughing out loud and like making my wife put her book down so I could read her random passages from this book. It's incredible. And then we talked about the adaptation of it. The Disney movie Sword in the Stone is based on the first of the three books that make up Once and Future King. And that actually, to my mind, is one of the best film adaptations ever. Not because it was so like strictly following the book, but because of how well they captured the spirit of the story.
My oldest kid liked Sword in the Stone a lot, so he got a little older, and so I showed him the Excalibur movie, and he was like, "This is fucked up."
Nice.
Nice. Charlie
Yeah, a
Hale,
little bit.
Nice.
with Jude Law and Charlie.
No.
The Sean Connery one.
Yeah. No. Is that
No.
that's
Liam
that's a
Neeson's
different
in
one.
it. He's Sir Gawain, but I can't think of any other
I
stars really that were in it. It was
I thought you were
a
talking about the
Helen
recent one.
Mirren
Yeah.
was in it. Liam Neeson. I'm blanking, but side tangent. I love King Arthur. My wife and I, on our honeymoon, we went to Cornwall.
Wow.
For a part of it, and went to Tintagel, where Arthur was supposedly born, and we went to the field where the final battle between Arthur and Mordred was supposed to happen, and they have plaques up and everything, like here's essentially where Arthur dies. And there was literally before you went into that field and saw all that stuff, there was a literal double wide that was like their little Arthur museum, and they had pieces from the Excalibur movie, like they had the boob armor, chest plate was there, and they had some helmets and stuff from the making of the movie. Yeah, that was really cool. So,
well, you're really into that legend. Have you heard of the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell?
Oh yes.
Okay.
I
have to recommend
adore
that
it.
if you have it, because I
Yeah.
thought I wasn't going to like it, being so married to Mallory. I was like, the idea of them
Sure.
messing with that, I don't know, but damn, it's good.
I love those. And I was introduced as a kid to the kind of the concept of the more historically accurate King Arthur, because my dad's one of his favorite series was the Pendragon Cycle by Stephen R. Lawhead. And so I've read those a million times ever since I was a kid, and it's got the magic in it from a kind of more Christian perspective than pagan, but it's also coming at it from the historical, like post-Roman, Britons versus Saxons perspective. So I was familiar with that historical angle of it. So yeah, when I read the Warlord Chronicles, I was hooked instantly.
He just made Lancelot like a real piece of work in that, and
Yes.
I love that it's turned that on its head. It's really good.
And it's a wonderful juxtaposition, that trilogy and Once and Future King, because I've always had a love-hate thing with Lancelot, depending on the version of the story, because specifically of the love triangle angle. And with Warlord, he is just this raging piece of shit. And in Once and Future King, you have this extremely likable, relatable, empathetic character.
See, I always thought, can you call it a love triangle? It's more like a third wheel, because it's like, I love my wife, and they love each other. Right. I'm just kind of over here.
Yeah. Arthur doesn't have much going on.
Yeah, that's very much in Once
It's all
and Future.
give, no, yeah. No,
The two-sided triangle here. Uh-oh.
Yeah. That's funny.
Which was one thing growing up that I loved about the Pendragon cycle was in that version, Guinevere is an Irish princess, and Lancelot is her bodyguard, and there's zero romantic anything between them. He's just this badass Irish warrior that then becomes one of Arthur's greatest knights as well. So yeah, Once and Future King, you should definitely check it out. I think you would really love it, especially if you love Lamort to Arthur. I truly think that you would love Once and Future
It
King.
is a very divisive book, because it seems like either people love it or hate it, but it's usually people who couldn't make it through Lamort to Arthur either.
I guess I don't know how you. I mean, if you don't like a good time, I mean, I literally was laughing. It was so funny. It was the hardest I've laughed. I think it was literally the hardest I've laughed out loud since reading the Samurai Cat books when I was like.
What's funny is when you said that at first, I thought you were talking about Mark Twain. I was like, well, yeah, Mark Twain's hilarious. Are you kidding?
No, it is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious. But
that's funny too.
But I believe it or not, I laughed harder at parts of Once and Future King than I did with Connecticut Yankee. We talked about Drenai Saga. This is not an older work, but it is an indie published series that we have read. There's 2 books out, and it's our good friend J.B. Jackson, his series De Re Dordica. It's
well, we became his friend after reading his book.
Yeah, we read it. He was gracious enough to come on the show. He's been on a couple of times. We're having him on again shortly, actually, to talk about Lioness with us. But it's a phenomenal series. It's I always forget the name of the literary device. It's first person, but it's all diary entries. And there's a literary term for it, and I always forget what it is.
Epistolary?
Epistolary.
Yeah,
Thank you. Yeah, it never sticks in my head, but it's an epistolary.
I love
word.
Dracula, and I love Michael Crichton's Eaters of the Dead, and that's how I actually learned what that's actually called for that reason.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
But it's about a young librarian works at the college library
in the later 70s.
In the late 70s, and his just kind of daily, normal, boring life. He's in a band, but he also is secretly into occult magic and
starts decoding a grimoire.
Yeah, and shenanigans ensue.
It's good to have lots of hobbies, I guess.
Yes. So the first
put
book
all
is
your
called,
eggs in one basket. You know?
Yeah, he's diversified for sure. Yeah.
But the first book is called Shagduk, Shagduk, and it's such a phenomenal series. I can't wait to see where he takes it. It's a slow burn, but it's in a very kind of Stephen King way.
It's very short. It is the only book I've laughed out loud at in probably a decade.
Yeah.
Like it is so funny. And even talking to him too, he was like, I tried to not be funny, but then I realized that it just was a funny story.
Yeah. And in a very dark story, it reminded me a lot of Stephen King, of Peter Straub. There's a lot of kind of Lovecraftian elements to it too, with occult demonology and everything. But we love JB and we love these stories, so definitely want to recommend those as a kind of refreshing modern book that does not feel like a modern book. He writes it very well, and so that it feels very of the time that he's writing. It feels like a diary written in 76 or whatever year it is.
You guys are adding to this little thing called the TBR. That's
yeah, no, we're sorry.
And then I know you like manga. Some manga, anyhow. Sort of, kind of.
There's a lot of manga out
There's a lot of it,
Yeah.
and some is better than others. We are currently reading Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Have you heard of Frieren?
I have not.
There's a phenomenal anime also. I think it's on Netflix now. But it is remarkably charming. And we were talking my not so hot take at the moment is that I think that Frieren is one of the most important works of fantasy anything that's happening right now. Because of its tone. It's very classic fantasy, both in a Tolkienian sense and a Dungeons and Dragons kind of sense. The story starts at the end of the quest, and it's the idea of like what happens to your heroes after the quest is done. And specifically, Frieren herself is an elf, and so not only what happens to the heroes after the quest, but what happens to the elf when all of her friends from this, monumental life event die, and she has lived on essentially unchanged because of her own, elfin lifespan. But I think it so neatly marries, like, kind of all of the, I guess, popular things in fantasy right now. There's a little bit of romance, not a lot, to a romantic aspect, but there's a cozy element. There is a darkness to it, but there's also the classic adventure and quests and magic and action.
And found family.
An odd sort of coming of age thing, even though the main character is like ancient compared to everyone else in the story. It melds all of those things so beautifully into one package, and I find myself getting like, it's very funny, it's very fun, it's very light, but I find myself getting like very emotionally moved with almost every single issue of the manga in a way that I haven't encountered before because of how deftly it's handled. So there's a manga recommendation for you of what we're reading right now. It's getting wildly popular in Japan.
Of all of the fandoms that recommend stuff, when I read Berserk, they went berserk with the recommendations. Yeah. Holy crap, man. And the thing is like, incredibly generous. I mean, they sent me all of One Piece that's been released in box sets. They sent me all of it.
Wow.
All of it. There's 4 box sets. It's like over 100 volumes. They sent me all of 20th Century Boys. They sent me almost all of Vagabond and a good handful of Vinland Saga. So it's like, I don't know when I'm going to read these, but it's another thing. Like, you want to talk about something that like I'm disillusioned with, and I don't think I'm going back. It's American comics.
Yeah,
we have talked about that as well.
It's been done. It's been done. I think Jeff Johns doing Green Lantern. That was like the last good comic run I ever read before I was like, this is just bad. And like, and it wasn't just me. I realized it wasn't me because you go to the bookstore and it's like, comics, manga. And it's just like, I thought for sure that it wasn't going to be for me because I was like, I've read comics my whole life. I can't change the direction that I read the comics in. And then I realized, from what I understand in Japan, that if your comic books aren't selling, well, you get fired. So you have to write really, really good stories. And I was like, that sounds like what I really, really am missing from American comics right now. And that's what made me decide to try Berserk, which, less Kentaro Miura, but like seriously, he passed away like literally like the week that I started reading. I was like, geez, sorry guys.
That's crazy.
I didn't mean to do this, but I'm so glad I did because I think the golden age of Berserk is like one of the best fantasy coming of age stories ever. Yeah. That's not hyperbole. Truly. It really was that good.
100%.
Yeah,
it was.
So I'm glad that I got into it, but it's like I think I tried to do too much at once. I did that, then I did Death Note, and then One Piece, which was 12 million volumes.
Yeah,
and
that's wildly
was like so much all at once. I think I was like, I got to ease off on this.
Yeah.
Did you finish One Piece?
No, I've been stuck in Skypea for like almost a year now, just because there's just so much going on. I saw your Berserk poster back there, and I was like, "Holy hell, that's awesome!" So.
Thank you. We're massive Berserk fans. That was the first manga that we read as a group was Berserk and Berserk and Full Metal Alchemist, which is also.
I knew I had become one of those when I heard like my oldest out there arguing with like some of his friends about who would win in a fight between blank and blank. And I was like, Guts would kick all their asses.
Guts. Yeah. That's Guts. No question.
I tried to get him to watch Full Metal Alchemist because he loved One Piece the anime. So I tried to get him to watch Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood, and he watched the first episode, and he was like, "Man," and I was like, "Oh, that's a dagger." I was going to watch it with him. I don't watch anime, but I was going to watch it with him.
That's so fascinating. That's a really good one.
The manga of Full Metal we adored as well.
Yeah, very good.
We have two final recommendations for you, Mike. And these are ones that I specifically have heard you talk about numerous times, and I think they were both on your recent video about recommendations that you keep getting. The first of which is Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe. And I have to take I have to take particular issue with one comment that you received from somebody about talking about the level of confusion with reading Gene Wolfe books, which is 100% a thing. You have to reset your expectations when you're reading Gene Wolfe. You're not going to know what's happening until you finish the entire thing, and even then, you're not going to know what's happening until you start it again. There is in the Wolfe space. There's a saying that you don't read Wolfe, you only reread Wolfe. But there was one comment that you mentioned.
We're really selling you on it.
No, well, this is complex. It's like a Wolfe book. It's complex. Selling
Wolfe to
right
now, you're just talking
complex.
about all the reasons I haven't started Book of the New Sun.
But here's the thing. Here's the thing. I had to get all that out of the way because the comment that I took a special issue with was the one person that said that Gene Wolfe didn't know what he was doing when he was writing.
Yeah, even Gene Wolfe didn't know what he was talking about.
Could not have been farther from the truth.
Yeah, Christopher Rocchio, huge fan, and he's told me that is absolute horseshit.
Okay, well, I'm glad that he jumped in too because
he will fight to the death about Gene Wolfe, absolutely.
Because the man who designed the Pringle knows everything from start to finish.
Yeah. Did you know that fun Gene Wolfe fact?
No.
Gene
he
Wolfe
designed the Pringle to be able to not
He's
break.
the guy who made the machine that made the Pringle a wave so they wouldn't.
So let's make them look like horse saddles. And
basically. That's what he did.
And it's essentially his face on the cans.
He talked about it too, that when they first started, he had it to where there would never be crumbs, because that's why they were supposed to be like the horse saddle, and then they shirked on the quality, which is why they were always broken.
You know what's sad is I bet he's more famous for that than he is for Book of the New Sun.
100%. He definitely is. But so Book of the New Sun is obviously by many people considered his seminal work, but I wanted to. And maybe Daniel might disagree, and if so, jump in.
Okay.
But I was going to recommend that if you're feeling hesitant on jumping into Gene Wolfe, I was going to recommend his fantasy duology, Wizard Knight, as a jumping off point.
Christopher's done that as well. Yeah.
Good. I like this guy. Wizard Knight is another is a changeling story. It's a fantasy story. It's a knightly epic set in a world of Norse mythology instead of Christianity, and it is one of my favorite books of all time. I don't want to say too much that it's going to start dipping into spoilery territory, even though it would make no sense. But I know you love coming of age stories. It's a very interesting coming of age story. And the characters are a delight, and it's absolutely phenomenal. And I think it's a little bit more accessible immediately than Book of the New Sun. It's also 2 books, and it's sold as 1 book, so it's not the Book of the New Sun is long. It's long if you get into the entire solar cycle, but Book of the New Sun itself is only 4 books.
Thank God, man. I'm sick of it's book 1 of a 9-book series. It's nice to hear things like that sometimes.
Well, I'm going to try to sell you on one other thing here when we get done with this.
Okay.
But so Daniel, what are your thoughts on Wizard Knight versus Book of the New Sun?
I think both are fantastic. Book of the New Sun's just about my favorite book series, especially when you include the the full solar cycle, which is 11 books in total, but there's 3 sections of it that are all sort of their own little contained thing. And I think they're totally worth the time, and that it's that. But I definitely agree that Wizard Knight is a book that makes more sense just as you read it than most of Book of the New Sun the first time through. But there's that Gene Wolfe depth on a reread, or as you think about past sections, as you learn things in the books. So I definitely
sounds like when I was doing Malazan, I said I feel like I'm doing my first reread of Malazan on my initial read, because I'll read a paragraph and like, I don't understand what just happened, so I would read it again. So
what's amazing about reading and then rereading Wolfe? Did you see the Scorsese film Shutter Island?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You know how when you watch Shutter Island a second time, it's like watching a completely different movie.
I haven't watched it a second time, but
okay.
I understand.
Well, you know the twist at the end, so it is. Yeah. It's kind of like it's like a different movie at the end, or when you watch it a second time. That only lasts for the second time. It's not a thing that keeps repeating over and over again. With Wolfe, there's layers to that onion that you uncover with every single read. I think you could pick a Wolfe book and read it every year for the rest of your life and still not uncover and figure out every single thing.
I think I've said that with a lot of Stephen King stuff, is because I read a lot of these when I was a teenager, and now going back and reading them as an adult, and I'm like, wow, it's like a completely different experience. And they're both good. They're both good experiences, you know?
Yeah. So
some authors are just good like that.
We're as anybody that has listened to more than half an episode of our podcast will attest, we are diehard Gene Wolfe fans, and proselytize as hard as we can the good news of Gene Wolfe. So either of those are phenomenal jumping off points. And I know that Christopher has been whispering in your ear about this forever, and I know that you've had a copy of Book of the New Sun, obviously, like we talked about at the beginning of the episode.
It's very, very pretty.
It's a beautiful copy. Finally, again, having followed your show for a while, I know this is something that you've had on your shelf for a while and that you've talked about for a while. And then some schmucks from
Man, I feel like I'm not doing my homework here or something, and he's calling me out for not turning in the assignment on time. All right.
My favorite, outside of Lord of the Rings, my favorite fantasy series of all time that I would like to try to convince you that you've gotten bad info about is The Black Company by Glenn Cook.
Ah, okay.
And what I would love to encourage you to do, because it is a long series. However, the first 3 books are essentially a pretty self-contained story. It's a linear story for all of the books. But the books of the North, essentially, the first 3, Black Company, Shadows Linger, and The White Rose. The omnibus edition is shorter than most modern fantasy books for all 3 books, and it is a self-contained story. It is definitely military fantasy. However, I think that what I have heard from the criticisms that some people have leveled about it towards you, or some of the things that they've said that have turned you off from it, I don't think are accurate as far as like big spaces of nothing happening. I think that there's a lot of amazing character development that happens through it. It's a lot of incredible characters. Glenn Cook was in the Navy and was, I think, a forward observer with a bunch of recon Marines right before Vietnam. And he essentially wrote every character in the Black Company based on fellas that he knew and served with. So there's everybody that I've talked to that was either in the military or was a veteran that has read these, they're some of their favorite books because they say that he nailed the camaraderie and the interaction between men like this in a way that they'd never experienced in the work of fantasy literature before. The use of magic is fascinating. There's a lot of magic in the books, but because the author of the book is not a wizard, there's no attempt to understand really how it works. So it's definitely falls in that soft magic category. But then also just knowing how you're a Grimdark fan, this is kind of the patient zero of what we now know of as Grimdark. Again, it was 1984, I think, was when The Black Company, their first book, was released. And And then something, I do hear people now starting to talk about and giving Glenn Cook credit for that, but he also was writing very strong female characters. And then in the later books after book 3, starting to write fantasy from a not European perspective way before many other people were doing. Like, that's fairly popular now. But he was writing that in the 80s and early 90s with some of the later stories. Knowing some of the things that you like, I do genuinely think that you would at least appreciate the first 3 books of the Bible.
That was on my bucket list for a long time, my fantasy bucket list. That was one of my series videos a long time ago where I list like my 5 bucket list fantasy series, and Black Company is the one I haven't done now. And the reason I took it off was when I was reading Malazan, the stuff that I was saying I wasn't liking, because I hadn't read a lot of military fantasy. The stuff I was saying I wasn't liking, everyone was like, well, you might want to go ahead and take Black Company off your list because it's a lot of that. So I think that kind of deterred me a little bit.
What were the things that turned you off that you weren't enjoying?
Sitting around campfires waiting for battles to happen that just take forever and they just do nothing. Yeah.
Well, so you guys would be slightly more honest about this than me, because I'm obsessed with these books and I've read them dozens of times at this point. I don't think there was that many. There's a lot of downtime, but it's short and it's usually right before something happens. And also, there's not a whole lot of. There are pitched battles, but in that first book, mostly what the Black Company themselves, the military organization, tries to do is more kind of what we would look at now as like special operations warfare. So they're not. They try to stay out of the big pitched battles as much as possible, and it's also it's also an epistolary book series. In those first 3 books, it's written by Croker, who is on the one hand he's the company surgeon, but he's also the analyst whose job it is to write down the history of the company, so a lot of the battles are not. It's not a Joe Abercrombie kind of situation where you're getting big gory details about battles. It's much more. It's a character driven story. It's exploring the ideas of the very very grimdark ideas of the perspective of the foot soldiers of the evil empire, I love them. But I never found the downtime parts to be boring or slow, because every single one that I can think of, you're getting a lot of character information and a lot of character scenes.
That's my thing, is if you're building your characters, I'm fine with that. I have no problem. That's what I'm here for. Give me less action, give me more character, honestly.
I'm the same way.
I don't need punching every 12 pages like a lot of people. Like the MCU generation, like they can't watch any movie now that it has dialogue. Like it's just got to be something blowing up every 30 seconds, so they can't focus on the movie without getting their phone out looking at it. It's not that I don't like the character moments, whatever. It's like what I said. I mean, I even complained about this with the heroes, Joe Abercrombie, which I loved. But I even complained about it there. My criticism was like, I understand that there's a lot of downtime between battles, and you need that time, clearly.
Yeah.
But I was like, I don't need to read about it. That's kind of what I said. But if it is a lot of character development, I'm here for that. Like the people who would say, "Hey, I used to love watching Stargate SG-1, but then there was episodes where like nothing would happen, or it was a Monster of the Week episode, and I didn't like it." And I'm like, "So you're missing all that character development?" Yeah. So I understand that. I get it.
I would say with Black Company, and I know Steven's a favorite. I enjoyed it. It's 3 200-page novels. So it's hard for me it's hard for nothing to happen in a book that short.
Right.
So it's obviously 3. So like,
that might seem lightning quick compared to some stuff I've been reading.
Absolutely.
I would think. And that's the thing. I've not read Malazan, so I can't say whether they're similar or not, good or bad. But I reading it, I would, there's campfire talks and like back at the barracks type stuff.
The particular scene in Malazan, it was in Deadhouse Gates, where there's seriously about 40 pages about how do we get the cattle across the river. And I was
that doesn't happen.
No,
in Black
that's
Company.
not.
That doesn't happen.
That doesn't happen in. That does not describe Black Company to me at all.
Yeah. I mean, the wizard fights in Black Company sometimes take a while, but that's at least fire
They were
blasts
fun.
are happening, I guess.
Yeah, it's. I think that maybe you've been led astray.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
that
so
can
I
happen,
would,
you know.
well, people have different opinions and people, take different things away. But
Well,
I
look
can.
how many people have told me that the Powder Mage books are just Sanderson light. And like everyone's like, I don't know who came just because he went to Brandon Sanderson's workshop. Everyone
Yeah.
just assumed that his book was Sanderson light, which is completely unfair. Because a lot of people said that about James Islington, and now they think James Islington hung the moon. So it's I think it's you can get people who hear that and they just kind of repeat it and they kind of repeat it, and that's
Yeah.
just kind of what it kind of falls into after a while.
Yeah.
So
I mean, what's crazy is Glenn Cook is still writing books. The dude's like 84
Is he
years
really?
old.
Wow.
Yeah,
He's got
a new
another
one.
Black Company coming out, doesn't he?
He's got 4. The first of this
Jeez.
new arc.
Good for him.
Yeah, so cool.
Comes out in November.
But I totally agree with you on the action thing. I know I'm and maybe I'm in the minority for like wider readers, but I love a few set pieces. But I love the Tolkien. The action even happens off stage, and we just get the rundown after the fact. I
like action scenes, but there's very few books where I'm like Red Rising. That's one where like he can write nonstop action somehow. Even the two people
Agreed.
sitting at a table having a discussion seems such high stakes that it feels like it's nonstop action. I mean I'm okay with that with a few series. Some people can do that well. Larry Correia did that well with Saga of Forgotten Warrior. It's really is almost like a thriller fantasy series. Some people are really really good at that. Other ones, it's just like, I mean, I won't lie, the last Triss book I read, I was just like, you write action really, really well, but I don't need Triss fighting someone every 4 seconds, man.
Yeah. Well, action is it should be, and it doesn't matter whether it's a book or it's a movie or a play or anything. I've done a lot of stage combat in the past, so had a lot of discussions about this. It should be a storytelling device. You should be learning as much about your characters from an action scene as you would through a dialogue interaction or anything else. Maybe even more because you're literally watching them take action and perform violence on other people. Like you should be learning something about your characters, not just. I say should. The John Wick movies are great. I love the John Wick movies, and they're essentially just nonstop action, and you don't really learn all that much about John that you didn't know from the first movie. But most of the time, again, you can have your little escapism parts, but most of the time, it should be character development. The action should be character development, not just flash.
Yeah, mileage is going to vary for everybody on that, but I know that there are some people. I've seen people saying like they skip action scenes. I'm like, I'm not going that crazy. I'm just saying I'm not here just to read battle after battle after battle. I'd rather it be like one significant battle in your trilogy, and that's what makes it matter than 3 or 4 battles per book.
Yeah.
There's few authors that can pull that off. John Gwynn's pretty good at it, actually. He usually has a few good battles, a few good shield walls. You go 100 pages of a John Gwynn novel, you don't hear something about a shield wall, something's going on.
Something's wrong.
Yeah, well, even
I've been sick that day.
At the very end of Faithful and Fallen, 200 pages of battle there at the end.
I think John Gwynn was really reading the Uhtred books a lot when he was writing those. He was like, shield wall. There's ever shield wall.
The Last Kingdom ones, yeah.
I deeply appreciate that John Gwynn wears his influences on his sleeve.
Oh yeah, no, I love Faithful and the Fallen, man. It's terrific.
Yeah.
Terrific. I need more modern fantasy like that. He's doing it. Michael J. Solomon's still really doing it well. I think Michael J. Solomon. You don't want anything too heavy, but you really want some like traditional kind of fantasy. Michael J. Solomon's doing a great job with the voice and books. Are so good, so enjoyable.
I'm trying to think of what the most modern thing that we've read was Daughter's War. We read Black Tongue Thief and Daughter's War, Christopher Buehlman's fantasy
the Broken Binding
series.
One of Daughter's War, yeah.
Yeah, I love him. I'm a big fan of Buehlman. His horror novels.
A lot of people recommend
too.
Black Tongue Thief to me a lot. Yeah.
If you like, well, here's what's interesting to me about those two is it's the same world. It has the same feel. I love that he made goblins scary, which is not something that happens very often. But one thing I love very much is that Daughter's War is very much military fantasy. Black Tongue Thief, even though they're in the same universe and shared characters, Black Tongue Thief, if it was written 30 or 40 years ago, would have been marketed as a sword and sorcery book, not as like an epic fantasy or even a grimdark fantasy. I see people talk about it. it feels very much to me as like a sword and sorcery book. Your character's a rogue essentially in that one, as evidenced by the title, Thief. But I'm
like
a big
Between
fan
Two
of those.
Fires, so I'll probably try more of his books. Yeah.
I've read a few of his horror books, his just straight up horror books that are also fantastic. I have a big soft spot for Between Two Fires, and his fantasy books I feel like kind of take the fantastical elements of Between Two Fires, and they're just like concentrating purely on that.
Just when you run a booktube channel, you get so many recommendations.
Oh my god!
So,
I
of
bet.
course,
I
yeah.
bet.
Everything that everyone's reading sounds amazing, and you get FOMO so much. It's so hard, and I don't audio, so I'm
Yeah. I was going to ask you about that.
six
No audio
books a
for you.
month is like pushing it for me, and I gotta have some short
that's
ones
a
in there
lot.
to even pull that off.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
so it's I mean, like I read little tiny ones right now because I'm trying to make sure I can fit more
Yeah.
books in. You know,
Right.
because I'm so sick of these books that are taking up an entire month to do. And
Right.
like this November, there's like 4 books coming out that are all like 900 pages long. So I'm trying to try to get all these little thin ones in now. But
Yeah.
it's tough because I get so many great recommendations, and I wish I could do everything. And
Yeah.
there's
Well, sorry,
people I would consider real life friends. I don't have time to read their books. You know, like Philip. I've only read one of Philip's books
right.
of his trilogy. You know, and I feel terrible about it. You know, so it's.
Well, sorry, like Dan was about to say, not sorry for adding to your pile.
No,
Yeah.
no. It's the thing is like sometimes you will be like flipping through the channels, and be like, I don't got nothing to watch. I don't have that problem with books. I've never been like, I got nothing to read. It's like, what do I sacrifice to read this? Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I had a nice schedule, and then they got me into this Dungeon Crawler Carl thing. I'm like, so what am I going to knock off so I can read book 2?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, what do I got to knock off my plans? Yeah. So
That's funny.
that's how
I
it
keep
works.
seeing that series popping up. I'm glad to hear that you liked it because I've not.
It's very,
I've
if
not
you
been,
want to laugh, it's very funny.
Sure.
It really was. I won't lie. A lot of the lit RPG elements aren't for me. Like, talking about his constitution and his will and stuff like that. And does this compound when you do this with your constitution, your strength, your
Right.
vitality? Shut up. But all the pop culture references and the dialogue are hilarious.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I reread Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy in 2022 and was like literally had to have a glass of water because I was laughing so much.
That's awesome.
And I was like, this is the first time since then I think I've laughed out loud that much reading a book.
Wow.
Fantastic. Well, we'll need to add that to the list, fellas.
It's pretty funny. It's not going to be for everyone. I'm definitely going to say that, but I can see why it's got such a massive following right now.
Yeah,
It's very
absolutely. Well, Mike, this has been fantastic. To wrap things up, Sam sometimes likes to do rapid fire questions.
Sure. Bring 'em on.
He's prepared. He's prepared
This
a
might
few
be
for
fun.
you.
I say that I prepared, but I actually just plugged it in ChatGPT along with a link to your channel.
There we go.
And I was like, ask this guy 10 really good rapid fire questions. Anyways, this is what it churned out. Okay, first one. Hardcover, paperback, or digital?
Hardcover if I'm reading in my desk, digital if I'm reading in bed.
Nice.
Okay.
Do you have this is an added question for me. Do you have like a light for your, because I do digital reading. Do you like just turn your lamp
The
on or
Kindle's
something?
backlit. It's backlit. And the thing is, like, if I try to read a regular paperback or anything in bed, my wife's like, turn your lamp out. And like, well, then I can't see my book. That was the whole reason I went and bought a Kindle in the first place.
There you
Yeah.
go.
Was because I can read
Exactly.
that at night and she doesn't tell me it's too bright. Yeah.
There
That's
you go.
nice.
Nice.
Okay. I have a Remarkable, which is like those little journals, but you can put books on it, but it's not backlit to where you
I was also
can
tired
see
of
it.
falling asleep in Stephen King 4-pound hardcover smashing me in the face. So it worked out.
It's pretty cathartic if you think about it, though.
Sorry, I'm ruining your rapid fire idea here. Ain't I?
Yeah, no, I
Told you I
kinda
can't
read it.
see short form content. Too much.
It's okay. We can cut it. Okay. Number 2. One author you'd grab a beer with, dead or alive.
Frank Herbert, because I feel like he would just make my third eye even clearer. Yeah,
Here we go.
Nice. Good
I would learn some things.
I love that.
Okay. Number 3. First book you ever did not finish and didn't regret.
Oh man, gosh, it's got to be
Doesn't
something
have
they
to
made
be
us read in
first
school. Probably The Great Gatsby. That shit's terrible.
Fair enough.
What a garbage human.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I like the Great Gatsby.
F. Scott Fitzgerald. I mean F. Scott Fitzgerald.
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
F.
Like-
Scott.
Okay, number 4. This applies to books. villain you secretly root for every time. I want to throw in like maybe a trope there too, if you don't want to attach to like a specific, but maybe a type of villain you're secretly rooting for, or an actual
well, if
villain.
it's movies, it's Darth Vader, but I guess you could say that with books too, because there's been a ton of Star Wars books. But I say Sandan Galacta, and yes, he's absolutely a villain.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
That was the first book I've ever like, holy crap, I'm rooting for the bad guys.
I'm rooting for the bad guy. Yeah, 100%.
A real Walter White, if you will. Okay, number 5. What's worse, a terrible ending or a slog of a middle?
A slog of a middle. I'm a Stephen King fan. He's wrote some bad endings, and I can accept that. If it, I didn't feel like it was boring getting there. Very much journey before the destination. If the journey is a slog, I don't care. Yeah, no. Give me a good story with an ending that's kind of underwhelming.
Underwhelming. Okay, great. That's great. Okay, number 6. I think you kind of already answered this, but audiobooks, is it a sacred tool or cheating?
I say do it works for your life. I'm jealous. I wish I could do it, guys. I'd get so much more done if I could do it. I could read so much more if I could actually do it. But I listen for 10 minutes and I'm like, I couldn't tell you 30 seconds of what I just heard. So
Sam, it's the same with you.
I'm the exact
you guys
same.
are the
I really,
listening
really
ADD.
want,
You got years of blocking
work.
out the kids. You just can't turn it off.
No, I block them out, but it's not like I'm focusing. It's more just like nothing. Yeah, I really want it to work too because we have a bunch of books that I get behind on. Okay, number 7. And maybe think about this through the lens you already have shared about your magic system proclivities, but fantasy magic system you'd want in real life.
Oh, geez. I think that Mistborn Allomancy is pretty neat because my kid
That
collects
would be my
coins,
answer,
and I
too.
could basically just fly with all these coins he got. So just push down the coin, I could basically just fly. It'd be really
pretty
great.
badass.
Help a
That
lot
is
with
very
traffic here in Houston. It would be great. I could
sure.
just fly with pennies
Absolutely.
going down the freeway.
That's great. I'm going to open this up to us too because I want to share my fantasy magic system I'd like to have in real life. And I totally wish that Pokemon was a real fucking thing because that would be incredible to have 7 little minions with you at all times that you like raise and they like love you.
Yeah, but they burn
they
your
live-
house down. God damn it,
No.
Charizard! Yeah.
Put him in the ball.
You burned the
He's
house
in
down
a
again.
ball. He's in a ball. That's
Yeah,
that's
and my
fine.
kids can't even pick up after themselves. You think they're gonna put their Pokemon away?
Well, if they get a Mr. Mime, he can like clean up.
Okay, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Daniel, do you have a magic system?
I don't have anything off the top of my head.
The Hunter.
I mean, I don't actually think I would like that to be real.
I would probably say like D&D because I'd want a fireball. That's what I would want.
Fireball's the job. Okay, back to you,
Magic
Mike.
missile.
Yeah, magic missile and fireball. That's all you need.
Number 8. You get to save one book series from a fire. What is it?
The Dark Tower.
Nice.
Really?
Love it.
Because they're all
Very
first
cool.
editions. So
There you go.
it's not because necessarily because of the book, it's because of the value.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Fair enough.
That's right. I mean, yeah, that's logical. Okay, 2 more. Number 9. A book you love but would never recommend to someone lightly.
The book that I love the most that I have a hard time recommending is Dune because it's not going to be a book for everyone. In fact,
Yeah.
a lot of people are always like afraid to tell me, "Oh, sorry, I didn't really like Dune." I'm like, man, I understand, man. I didn't. It took me 3 times before I loved it. So yeah, I would say Dune has become more acceptable and approachable since the movies have come out.
Sure.
More people have gotten interested in it. But for the longest time, I was like, I'm not going to recommend that to anybody because they'll be like, "What the hell are you reading,
Yeah.
man?"
It's sad. It's
get
really
weird.
great. And no, they do get weird, but they're really great. It's
They
sad
get as far as
people
like
don't go there.
what the hell is this? What am I reading?
I mean, doesn't a worm have giant man arms at one point? Okay,
Oh,
last
get into
question.
God Emperor. No, I cannot recommend God Emperor to people even who did like Dune. So
Yeah, it's true.
That's funny. All right, final question. Number 10. A genre that you've tried to get into and just can't.
well, it was lit RPG until like last week. So
There you go. There you go.
I was like, man, I love playing Final Fantasy. I don't want to read about you grinding for XP though, But it's done pretty well in that book. But I tried to Cradle, and oh my god, no,
Okay.
way too super serious, and it's like this is not serious stuff. What are
I was
we
gonna
doing?
say super serious does not seem to be something that should be included in lit RPG. Like,
So
that
in,
kinda
in
seems
Cradle,
like
there's a part
counterintuitive.
where I tapped out. It's like their friend is like being held in a prison, and they break in to break him out, And he's like, "Get me out of here!" Like, wait, no, you need to stay in there and face this monster so you can get to the next level. I closed that book so quick. Not my brand.
Incredible.
Cool.
Awesome.
That's it.
Mike, thank you so much for your time, man. This was
I
a
appreciate it,
fantastic
guys.
conversation. It was great to finally meet you and hang out. And again, I've loved your show for a while now. And yeah, it's just been, thank you for being so gracious with your time and for hanging out with us.
I appreciate it so much. There's nothing I like to do more than talk about books. So
I love
Fantastic. Well,
been
hopefully
great, man.
hopefully we can do this again sometime. Talk about more things. Talk about Grimdark. Talk about whatever.
if I finally do Gene Wolfe, we'll get together and have a talk.
Hell yes!
Yeah,
If you read
let's
Gene
do
Wolfe,
it.
if you read Black Company, if you read any of them, we'd be more than happy to talk to you about it.
Absolutely.
So, everybody, you can find Mike on YouTube at Mike's Book Reviews. Check out his channel, give him some love, and yeah, thanks again, Mike. We love you all. We'll see you at the next episode. Namarie.